I used to believe the body couldn't lie, that whatever pain it carried, however invisible, would eventually find a voice, through fever, through tears, through some small rebellion of the flesh. But when the doctor said the word Barren, the silence that followed wasn't medical, it was surgical. It cut through me so cleanly that I didn't even bleed at first. I remember my husband's hand tightening around mine, that well-rehearsed expression of concern softening his face. He squeezed once, looked at me with practiced sympathy, and said, "We'll get through this." The nurse's eyes flickered to him, then to me, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw pity there. Not for me, but for what she knew I didn't. That night, he made tea the way he always did, 2 spoons of sugar, no words. The house smelled of antiseptic and silence. I sat on the couch, staring at the medical report, the word infertile underlined twice in red. My name sat above it, neat and damning. Something about the handwriting bothered me. It wasn't the doctor's. I'd seen her notes before, small and slanted. This was sharper, more deliberate. But I was too numb to question it then. He took the report gently from my hands, folded it once, and slid it into the drawer beneath the TV. "You don't need to see that again," he said softly, and kissed the top of my head like he was closing a lid. For months, I carried the word like a coffin inside me. Friends stopped asking when we'd start a family. His mother stopped calling altogether. And I stopped looking in mirrors that showed more than my face. He grew distant but not cruel. He had the kind of detachment that could masquerade as kindness. He'd say things like, "It's not your fault," and "We'll make peace with it someday." But every syllable was measured, rehearsed. I began to suspect that he wasn't comforting me. He was conditioning me. Then came the day the body spoke after all. It was subtle at first. A missed period, a nausea I chalked up to nerves, a heaviness in my stomach that felt like grief taking shape. When I finally took the test, I did it in secret, half convinced it was impossible. 2 lines. Bold. Certain. I stared until my reflection blurred behind the plastic stick. I laughed, a sound that didn't feel like mine. And then I cried, hard, until the bathroom floor went dark beneath me. When I told him that evening, he didn't react. He looked at me for a long time, then said quietly, "That's not possible." I showed him the test, trembling, desperate for a flicker of joy, but his face hardened instead. "It's a false positive," he said. "These things happen. Don't get your hopes up." His voice was calm, too calm. That was when I knew. He wasn't surprised. He was afraid. I went to another doctor the next day, alone. I told her everything. The infertility diagnosis, the strange handwriting, the test. She frowned as she pulled up my records. "You've never been tested for infertility here," she said. My breath caught. "What?" I whispered. She turned the screen toward me, and there it was, blank spaces where the reports should have been. No test, no file, nothing. The red underlined report had never existed. She ran the scans herself. Her voice softened when she turned to me. "You're pregnant. Around 8 weeks." My body swayed, the world tilted. 8. I repeated, my voice shaking. She nodded. "You didn't know." I could barely form the words. He told me I couldn't. She gave me a look I still can't describe. Part disbelief, part fury. Then he lied. I walked home in a fog, one hand over my stomach, as if trying to shield the fragile truth inside me from the man waiting on the other side of that door. When I entered, he was sitting in the dark, phone in hand, the faint glow painting his face. "Where were you?" he asked. I told him everything. The silence that followed was longer than the one in that doctor's office, and much, much colder. He smiled then, slow, deliberate. "You shouldn't have gone behind my back," he said, and that was when the fear began. When I woke up the next morning, the house was too quiet. Not the comforting kind of quiet, but that suffocating stillness that creeps under your skin, the kind that knows something has shifted. He was already gone. His side of the bed was cold, untouched. On the table lay a note folded twice, "Don't do anything stupid." No name. No explanation. Just those words, like a warning or a curse. I sat there for a long time, tracing the letters with my finger until the ink began to smudge. My reflection in the window didn't look like mine anymore. My eyes seemed older, darker, as if I'd aged overnight. I told myself to stay calm, to breathe, to think. But the truth was, I didn't know what I was dealing with anymore. I used to believe marriage was built on trust. Now I wasn't even sure it was built on truth. The following days blurred together. Phone calls unanswered, doors closed, whispers from neighbors that tightened like vines around my name. When he finally returned, it was late. I was sitting on the couch, my hand resting on my growing stomach, the doctor's report lying open in front of me like evidence. He looked at it once, then at me, and said, "We can't keep it." The way he said it, like it wasn't a child but a mistake, made something inside me break quietly. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, I just asked, "Why?" He hesitated, then exhaled, "Because it's not mine." My mind went blank. For a moment, the world around me vanished. No sound, no air, just the echo of that sentence looping inside my skull. "Not yours," I repeated, disbelief curdling into rage. "What are you saying?" He shrugged, emotionless. "You said it yourself. You were barren. So tell me, how is this possible unless someone else?" I slapped him before he could finish. My hand stung, but it was nothing compared to the fire in my chest. "You forged that report," I said, voice trembling but sure. "You made me believe I was broken." He didn't deny it. Not once. He just looked at me like a scientist watching an experiment spiral out of control. "You were happier that way," he said softly. "You stopped asking questions." The calmness of his tone was worse than shouting. It was the voice of someone who truly believed he had done nothing wrong. That night, I locked the bedroom door. He didn't knock, didn't try to explain. I heard him downstairs pacing, whispering into his phone. I caught a few words. "Too soon." "She knows." "No, I can handle it." My skin prickled. The next morning, I packed a bag. Just clothes, the report, and the ultrasound photo the doctor had printed for me. When I stepped outside, I saw his car parked across the street, engine running. He didn't get out. Just watched. I turned the other way and started walking. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay. But before I reached the end of the street, a text buzzed on my phone. "You can run, but you can't hide this forever." I froze. My heart thudded so loud I could feel it in my throat. How could he send that to his own wife? To the woman carrying his child? Or so I thought. I went to stay with my sister. She asked no questions, only offered silence and soup. I tried to rest, but every creak of the house sounded like his footsteps. Every car that slowed outside made my breath hitch. 3 weeks passed before I went for another scan. The doctor smiled as the screen lit up, and I saw 2 shapes instead of 1. "Twins," she said, her voice gentle. I laughed and cried all at once. 2 heartbeats, fluttering like tiny birds. Proof that I wasn't broken. Proof that the lie he built around me was already crumbling. That night, I sent him a picture of the ultrasound. No words, just the image. Minutes later, he called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was tight, controlled. "Delete that picture," he said. "Now." "Why?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Because." He paused, breathing hard. "You don't know who's watching." Then the line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone, realization dawning slow and cold. This wasn't just about jealousy or pride. This was something else. Something bigger. Someone else was involved, and he was protecting them. That was the moment the fear changed shape. It wasn't just about what he'd done. It was about what he was still hiding. After that call, I didn't sleep for days. Every sound in the house became an alarm bell, every shadow a threat. My sister told me to report him, to block his number, to move somewhere safe. But the problem wasn't just him anymore. It was what I didn't understand. The more I tried to recall, the less made sense. How had I gone through months of doctor visits, appointments, checkups, without ever seeing the results myself? Who paid those bills? Whose signature was on the insurance forms? Each question led to another hole. Another dark corner of my own life that I'd let him manage, trusting him to be the adult in the relationship while I focused on surviving the quiet disappointments of marriage. And now, all that trust felt like a crime scene. One night, I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove back to our old house. Our house, though it already felt like his. The curtains were drawn, but the porch light off, but there was another car parked in the driveway. Not his. Black, sleek tinted windows. My stomach turned as I stepped closer, heart hammering. I recognized that car from somewhere. I'd seen it outside the clinic the day I learned I was pregnant. The same car, same dent near the fender. I remember because I'd touched it absent-mindedly that day, tracing the scratch with my finger as I tried to calm myself before walking in. The front door was locked, but my key still worked. Inside, the air smelled different, chemical sharp. I crept through the living room and stopped dead. The drawer where he had once hidden my infertility report was empty. Every document, every paper, gone. The sound of a door closing upstairs made my breath catch. Someone was here. I froze, then heard voices, his voice low and hurried, and a woman's. "She's not supposed to know," the woman said. "You told me she'd never find out." His answer was muffled, desperate. "She wasn't supposed to get pregnant." "It's not possible, unless—" Silence, then footsteps moving closer to the stairs. I slipped into the pantry, my pulse so loud it drowned out thought. The woman's heels clicked against the floorboards. 3 steps, pause, 3 steps. I peeked through the crack and saw her face. She wasn't a stranger at all. She was the nurse from my first fertility appointment, the one who'd looked at me with pity when the doctor announced I couldn't conceive. They stopped near the doorway. I could hear them breathing. "You have to end this," the nurse whispered. "If she keeps the twins, everything falls apart." Twins. The word cut through the air like a blade. My hand went to my belly, protective instinct replacing fear. He spoke again, voice trembling. "It's too late. She knows," the nurse hissed. "Then you'd better hope she doesn't tell anyone, or you'll lose more than your marriage." A door slammed, followed by the sound of an engine roaring to life. I waited until silence swallowed the house again before stepping out. My legs shook so hard I could barely stand. The nurse's scent, cheap perfume and hospital antiseptic, lingered in the air like evidence. I grabbed what I could, a stack of shredded papers from the trash bin, a USB drive near the computer, and the framed photo of us on our wedding day. The smile on his face now looked like a confession. When I got back to my sister's, I locked myself in the guest room and plugged in the USB. It was encrypted, but a single folder opened. A video file. I clicked play. The screen flickered, showing an ultrasound room, dated months before the day he told me I was infertile. The nurse stood beside him, laughing softly, and there was my name on the monitor. My pulse stopped when I saw it. 2 tiny flickering shapes, unmistakable heartbeats. My babies. He'd known all along. He'd been there, watching the monitor, pretending it wasn't happening. The nurse's voice cut through. "You're lucky. Most men don't get to control the outcome like this." He smiled. "It's not control. It's correction." Then he reached forward and switched off the machine. The video ended. I sat there, shaking, the truth burning through me like fire. He hadn't just lied. He'd erased me from my own story, my own motherhood, my own body. The next morning, I took the USB to the police. They promised to investigate, to reach out to the clinic, but their tone was polite and procedural, like they were reading from a script. "We'll look into it," they said, which really meant, don't expect much. I left the station feeling exposed, like the walls themselves were watching me. My phone buzzed again, a blocked number. "You shouldn't have done that," the voice said. It wasn't his. It was hers, the nurse. My blood went cold. "Who are you?" I whispered. There was a pause, then she said, "I'm the reason your husband still has a job. Walk away, and I'll make sure your twins live a normal life." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat in my car, hands trembling on the steering wheel, and realized something terrifying. This wasn't about love, or even betrayal. It was about something systematic, something that had started long before me. And if I didn't uncover it fast, I might never live to see my children born. After that call, I stopped being scared, not because I felt safe, but because fear had burned itself out and left something sharper behind rage. I stopped trembling and started watching. People underestimate what a desperate woman can notice. The details I once ignored began to assemble themselves into something resembling truth. The clinic's address, the names on the insurance forms, the hidden accounts I'd found on our shared laptop, they all pointed to one place: Genesis Biogenetics. A private facility posing as a fertility clinic, tucked behind glass walls and soft voices. I drove there one evening, my hoodie pulled low, my stomach heavy with the twins who had become my compass. The lobby smelled of lavender and lies. A receptionist smiled too wide, her tone rehearsed. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. I told her I was here to see Dr. Morrow, the same doctor who had once told me I was barren. Her smile faltered just enough to betray recognition before she forced it back. "I'm afraid she's not in today." I leaned forward. "Tell her I know she falsified my report." The receptionist's face went pale. For a second, the mask slipped. Then she pressed a button beneath the counter. Somewhere behind her, a door clicked shut. That's when I saw him, my husband, stepping out from a hallway in a gray suit, his tie loosened, his expression carefully blank. For a moment, the world tilted. He shouldn't have been there. "You need to go home," he said quietly, glancing around as if afraid of being overheard. "You shouldn't have come here." My laugh came out raw and jagged. "Shouldn't have come. You forged my medical records. You let me believe I was broken. You knew I was pregnant and you what? Hid it?" His jaw tightened. "You don't understand what's at stake." "Then make me," I spat. But his eyes, those eyes I'd once trusted to tell the truth, looked through me like I was a problem to be managed. "This isn't about us," he said, almost pleading. "It never was." Behind him I caught movement. 2 men in lab coats watching. One of them whispered something to the other, then reached into his pocket. I didn't wait to find out what came next. I turned and ran. Outside, the rain came down hard, blurring the streetlights into smears of gold and white. I ducked into an alley, clutching my belly, trying to steady my breath. The USB drive burned like a live wire in my pocket. When I looked back, I saw him standing under the awning, phone pressed to his ear, scanning the street like a man watching a ghost. That night, I drove until the city disappeared behind me. I checked into a cheap roadside motel, the kind that smells like bleach and loneliness. As I lay on the stiff bed, I pressed my palms to my stomach and whispered, "I'll keep you safe." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I could. Sleep came in flashes. Dreams of ultrasound screens flickering to static, of doctors' faces melting into shadows, of my husband's voice whispering from somewhere I couldn't see its correction, not control. When I woke up, there was a message under the door. No envelope, no name, just one line written in the same sharp handwriting I'd seen on the forged report. "If you want the truth, come alone." An address followed, an industrial warehouse on the outskirts of town. Against every instinct I went. The building was half abandoned, its walls humming with the low buzz of machinery behind locked doors. Inside, the air was thick with the metallic scent of sterilization. A single figure stood near the center. Dr. Morrow. She didn't look surprised to see me. "I told him this would happen," she said softly. "You were never supposed to find out." I wanted to scream, to shake her, but all I could do was whisper, "Why?" She looked at me like a teacher explaining a difficult lesson. "Because your body was special. Resistant. The trial needed subjects who wouldn't reject the sequence." My stomach turned. "Trial," she nodded. "You weren't infertile. You were part of an early study. Your husband volunteered you." The words hung in the air, impossible and undeniable. "He said you'd never want children, that you'd panic if you got pregnant. We used that lie to keep you calm." My knees nearly gave out. "So my babies," she hesitated. "They're real. They're yours." but they're also part of something much bigger than you understand. I felt my heart breaking in slow motion. You made me an experiment, I whispered. You turned my life into data. Her eyes softened with something that almost looked like guilt. You should leave town before he comes looking for you again. That was when I realized something. She wasn't warning me out of kindness. She was terrified. Terrified of him. Of what he was capable of. I backed away slowly, my mind spinning, the floor tilting beneath me. As I stepped outside, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video message. I opened it and nearly dropped the phone. It was footage from inside my motel room, me sleeping, my hand resting on my belly. The camera angle was from above, like a security feed. The caption read, "You can't hide from the man who made you a mother." I didn't remember leaving the warehouse. One moment, Dr. Morrow's eyes were on me, unblinking, and the next, I was on the highway with the world sliding past in streaks of gray and gold. The phone clutched so tight in my hand it left marks. The message, that impossible video, looped silently in my mind like a memory that refused to fade. I didn't need to play it again to know what it meant. I was being watched. But by who? Him. The clinic. Someone else altogether. I parked behind a gas station, nausea rising, my pulse trembling in my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to vanish, to disappear before the truth consumed me whole. But then I felt the twins move. A small flutter, like a heartbeat against my hand, and the fear dissolved into something colder, steadier. If they wanted me silent, I'd do the opposite. I'd speak. I'd dig until every lie was dragged into the light. I checked into a new motel under a different name, using cash. I turned off my phone, bought a burner, and started recording everything: names, dates, faces, documents. It became a ritual, evidence before sleep, protection before fear. And yet, each night when I closed my eyes, I could still feel the camera on me, invisible but certain. Like the air itself was watching. The next day, I went to the clinic again. Not the private one this time, but the public hospital where I'd first learned the truth. I asked for copies of my records, the real ones. The clerk hesitated, checked her computer, then printed a single page, one page. The rest were restricted, she said. When I looked closer, the document wasn't about infertility or pregnancy. It was a transfer form. My name, my husband's signature, and a code under, study reference. It matched the initials I'd seen on the USB GB24, Genesis Biogenetics Study 24. I asked what that meant. She frowned, said the database didn't go that deep, and suggested I talk to my husband. The way she said it made my skin crawl. I thanked her, left, and sat in the car, the paper shaking in my hands. The code felt like a key. But to what door? That night I tried searching it online. Nothing. Every result led to blank pages, redirects, medical jargon that dissolved into digital static. Then my screen flickered, and for a heartbeat, a single phrase appeared in the search bar: "Stop looking." Then it vanished. It was around 3 a.m. when the power went out. The motel room went black, the hum of the mini fridge dying into silence. I sat up, heart racing, the paper still under my pillow like a talisman. But the darkness didn't feel empty. It felt thick, alive, like it was listening. I whispered to the twins, more to steady myself than anything. "We're okay," I said softly. "They can't touch us here." The words floated in the dark, fragile and unconvincing. When the lights finally flickered back, everything was as it had been, except the mirror. Someone had written something across it in condensation. "You don't know what he saved you from." My throat closed. I stepped closer, the message fading as the air cooled, my reflection warping behind the letters. What had he saved me from? What could possibly justify everything he'd done? The next morning, I packed again. I drove to the address on the transfer form. A storage facility on the edge of the industrial district. Rows of metal doors, numbered and silent. I found Unit 24, the code stamped faintly on the handle. The lock had already been cut. Inside, instead of boxes, there was only a single object, a hospital incubator. Empty, humming faintly, its lights still on. My breath caught. Beside it sat a file marked, "Pilot results. Confidential." I opened it and found photos, ultrasound scans, charts, notes written in my husband's handwriting. Next to Patient Quensala 1 was my name, but there was something else, a line that made my knees give out. Viable twin sequence achieved after prior loss. Prior loss. The words blurred. I flipped the page and saw a name written beneath subject Alpha. Deceased. No photo. No details. Just that word. My stomach turned. Had there been another pregnancy before this? Something I didn't know about. The realization struck like lightning. They hadn't been studying infertility. They'd been studying memory. Erasure. Manipulation. I wasn't their first test. I was just the one who woke up too soon. The incubator lights flickered once and went out. I left the file, ran to my car, and drove until dawn painted the sky pale and new. Somewhere, between exhaustion and terror, I began to laugh, a hollow, breaking sound. He'd told me I was barren, and I'd believed him because I trusted the man who looked me in the eye every morning and said he loved me. But love wasn't what he wanted. Love doesn't need control. Love doesn't rewrite biology. Now I wasn't just a wife. I wasn't even a victim. I was a variable, and variables, once they break free, can't be predicted. I spent the next 48 hours chasing ghosts across state lines. The road hummed beneath me like a heartbeat, steady and mechanical, while my mind replayed everything I'd seen inside that storage unit. Each image, the incubator, the coded files, my own name scrawled beside the words prior loss, looped behind my eyes until the lines between memory and hallucination blurred. I stopped trusting time. Day and night folded into one another until the only constant was the hum of the tires and the pulse beneath my skin. I didn't eat much. I didn't sleep. I just drove and thought, and the thoughts grew louder than the engine. By the time I reached the city where Genesis Biogenetics listed its corporate office, I was a shell moving on instinct. The building itself was almost ordinary mirrored glass, manicured hedges, the illusion of respectability. But when I stepped inside, I felt the same sterile chill I'd felt at the clinic, that faint hum in the air that makes you feel like you're standing inside a machine instead of a room. I told the front desk my name. The receptionist froze, then pretended to scroll through her monitor. "You're not in the system," she said. I smiled, too calmly, and replied, "That's exactly why I'm here." She hesitated, then buzzed someone. 10 minutes later, a man in a dark suit appeared, carrying a clipboard and an expression built from politeness and denial. He asked if we could speak privately. I followed him into a conference room lined with frosted glass. When he closed the door, his tone changed. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low but almost gentle. "There are things you don't want to understand." I laughed softly. "You mean things you don't want me to remember?" He flinched, just slightly. I took out the paper from the transfer form and placed it on the table between us. "Tell me what Study 24 is," I said. His eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. "It's been terminated," he whispered. "Everything was archived." "Where?" I asked. He hesitated, then slid a business card across the table. "If you really want answers, go there. But when you do, you'll wish you hadn't." The address led me a campus of abandoned research buildings, 2 towns away, their windows boarded, their signs faded. The wind howled through broken vents, carrying the scent of rust and forgotten things. I found Building C, its door chained but weak, and slipped inside. Dust coated the floor like ash. The hallway lights flickered when I touched the switch, revealing rows of filing cabinets, their drawers half open as if someone had left in a hurry. A single word was stenciled on the far wall, Archive. I walked toward it, the air growing colder with each step. Inside the room, dozens of folders lay stacked in chaotic towers. Each one bore a number, a name, a short description. Subject Alpha. Subject Beta. Control. My fingers trembled as I flipped through them. Most files were empty, blank pages where data should have been. But near the bottom, one folder was sealed with wax, labeled Continuation Request, approved by M.L. Kane. My husband's initials. I broke the seal. Inside were photos of embryos, genetic diagrams, and a letter addressed to Research Lead Phase 2. The letter was dated 3 months after I'd been declared infertile. It described successful implantation following chemical memory suppression. My breath caught. I whispered the words aloud. They sounded impossible and yet familiar, as if my body already knew them. Beneath the letter was something else, a printed transcript of a therapy session. My name again, my voice, describing dreams I didn't remember having, white rooms, voices behind glass, lullabies that ended in static. The therapist's notes read, "Subject demonstrates consistent amnesia within controlled parameters." I dropped the pages. The room tilted, the walls breathing in and out with my pulse. I wasn't just experimented on physically, they'd rewritten parts of my memory to hide what they were doing. Maybe the infertility wasn't a lie at first. Maybe they had taken something from me and then made me forget it. My hand went to my stomach, trembling. The twins kicked, sudden and alive, as if reminding me of what was real. I spent hours gathering everything I could carry, files, tapes, even fragments of broken hard drives, and stuffed them into a duffel bag. By the time I stepped outside, dawn had broken. The sunrise looked too bright, almost violent against the gray buildings. For a moment, I felt something like peace. I had proof. I could finally expose them. But peace doesn't last long when you're living in a story someone else has tried to erase. As I reached my car, I noticed the man from the corporate office standing by the gate, watching me. He didn't speak. He just nodded once, as if acknowledging a move in a game already decided, and then turned away. Driving back toward the city, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked different. Tired, older, but sharper too. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was planning. They had taken control of my body, my memories, even my narrative. But they hadn't taken my will. The files in the passenger seat whispered softly every time the car hit a bump. A rustle like breathing. Somewhere inside those pages was the reason he'd done it. The truth about the twins, the truth about me. And when I found it, I'd make sure the world heard what they'd tried to bury in silence. By the time I reached the edge of the city again, exhaustion had become something physical, a second skin that clung to me and slowed my breathing. I checked into a nameless motel under an alias I barely remembered inventing. The man at the counter didn't look up as he handed me a key. Inside, I dumped the files across the bedspread and started sorting. Every page was a piece of someone's story. Some other woman's blood tests, ultrasound stills, transcripts of interviews where the same calm male voice repeated, "Do you remember what you signed?" None of them remembered. I wasn't alone. That realization struck like a quiet thunderclap. There were others, and maybe they'd been silenced too. The noise of the highway outside blurred into a heartbeat as I lined up the evidence. My husband's signature was everywhere, small but certain, an architect of silence. The further I read, the more the language changed from clinical to desperate. Reports replaced by personal notes, annotations in his handwriting. The subject is responding emotionally to residual memory. Terminate phase if recurrence continues. Recurrence, my dreams, the flashes of light, the lullabies that stopped halfway through. They weren't dreams at all. They were pieces of what he'd tried to erase. I needed help, but who could I trust? Police wouldn't touch something they couldn't name. Journalists wanted proof. Not paranoia. I thought of my daughter first. Her face when she'd asked why Daddy was never home. Her laugh that sounded like mine before the world became data. I couldn't drag her into this. Then I thought of Emma, an old friend from university who'd left law for investigative work. She'd once told me that truth had a price, but it was always worth paying. I called her from the motel phone. When she answered, her voice sounded cautious, like she was already bracing for the storm. I told her everything in a single breathless rush, the words tumbling over each other until silence filled the line. Then she said, "Send me the files. Don't meet anyone. Don't sign anything. I'll come to you." For the first time in weeks, I felt the faint outline of safety. I faxed what I could and waited. While I waited, I kept reading. There were letters addressed to investors, Phrases like genetic continuity, memory partitioning, selective fertility recovery. The words meant nothing and everything all at once. They'd taken the most intimate act, creating life, and turned it into a laboratory process. And I had been both subject and result. When Emma arrived 2 days later, she looked at me the way doctors look at survivors, part relief, part disbelief. She spread the files across the floor, built a map of names and dates, connected them with red threads she pulled from a sewing kit. "This is bigger than him," she murmured. "He's just one operator in a network." I asked the only question that mattered. "Why tell me I was barren?" She traced a line between 2 dates. "Because they needed you to believe it. A clean slate, no attachments, easier to monitor outcomes when the subject doesn't expect them." I felt the air leave my chest. The twins weren't a miracle. They were the outcome of a study. But I wasn't going to let that define them. Or me. That night we made copies of everything and stored them in cloud drives under false names. Emma planned to leak parts of it to different journalists simultaneously, too fragmented to suppress. "But information wants to travel," she said. "It always does." I watched her sleep on the sofa, her laptop glowing faintly in the dark, and thought about the life I'd have to rebuild after the story broke. I imagined confronting him, the man who had once sworn he loved me enough to build a future, and instead built a cage. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth, the kind that doesn't fade when daylight hits. In the quiet of that motel room, I felt the twins stir again. 2 small reminders that life, no matter how engineered, still belongs to the one who carries it. When morning came, the world looked sharper, edges outlined by resolve. I packed the evidence into 2 suitcases, one for Emma, one for me. We left separately, in case anyone was watching. Before I turned the key in the ignition, I took one last look at the motel in the mirror, another temporary home built on borrowed silence, and drove east, toward the courthouse where I would file the first formal report. Somewhere behind me, I could almost feel the machinery waking up, realizing its secret was slipping through my fingers. But I wasn't running anymore. I was documenting, archiving, surviving. They'd tried to bury the records. I was going to make them sing. The courthouse smelled like rain and disinfectant, that particular scent of bureaucracy where lives get rewritten in ink. I sat outside the records office, my hands folded over a manila envelope that felt heavier than it should have. Inside were copies of the files, the transcripts, the letter with his signature, everything that had once been unspeakable now reduced to evidence. The clerk at the window looked young, bored, and already late for lunch. When I told her I needed to file a complaint involving medical malpractice, fraud, and identity tampering, she raised her eyebrows like I'd said the weather was conspiring against me. "You'll need to see a judge," she said flatly, stamping my papers. "This kind of thing doesn't go through standard channels." I almost laughed. Nothing about my life went through standard channels anymore. As I waited for the case number to be assigned, I looked around at the people in line. Men arguing about property disputes, women holding custody documents, and thought about how betrayal always starts as paperwork. A signature here, a promise there. Love turned into a legal arrangement, faith disguised as fine print. Emma arrived halfway through the day, her coat dripping from the storm outside. "They're stalling?" she whispered. "I've spoken to 2 reporters. One's interested. But she wants a statement from you on camera." The thought of telling the world made me dizzy. My voice didn't feel like something I owned anymore. It had been manipulated, recorded, analyzed. But silence was a luxury I couldn't afford. "Fine," I said. "If that's what it takes." She nodded, then handed me her phone. "Also, someone's been trying to trace the cloud drives." I moved the data to an encrypted server. "Don't check your email." A shiver crawled through me, part fear, part anticipation. The walls felt closer, the hum of fluorescent lights louder. I realized then that exposure wasn't a single moment, it was a series of small deaths. The death of denial, of trust, of anonymity. The next morning, we filmed the interview in a quiet office Emma rented under another name. The journalist, a woman with tired eyes and a calm voice, listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked, "What do you want from this?" I paused. "Not revenge," I said slowly. "Recognition. I want them to admit that what they did was real. That I was real." She nodded, her expression unreadable. "People will doubt you. They always do. But once it's public, it can't be erased." That sentence stayed with me. It became my mantra. Once it's public, it can't be erased. I repeated it every time fear tried to crawl back into my throat. When the story went live, the world didn't explode the way I imagined. It rippled. Quiet at first, then spreading. Online forums dissected the files. Activists called it the next biomedical scandal. He didn't respond directly, but within days, his company released a statement denying all involvement. A lawyer called me that same night, offering a settlement and an NDA thicker than a novel. I hung up before he finished speaking. Emma warned me they'd try to make me disappear in paperwork again. Offer protection that felt like silence. But something had changed in me. I was tired of being studied, tired of existing in the margins of someone else's research. I started keeping my own record, a video journal. Every night I spoke to the camera, documenting everything. The calls, the threats, the moments I almost doubted myself. "If you're watching this," I'd whisper into the lens, "it means truth survived longer than fear." Weeks blurred together. Investigators reached out, cautiously at first, then urgently. Lawsuits began stacking up against Genesis Biogenetics. Anonymous emails arrived, some supportive, others venomous. A woman from another state wrote, "I think it happened to me too." Another said, "I remember the lullabies." Each message was a fragment of the same broken mirror. I started to understand that what I'd uncovered wasn't just a betrayal of marriage. It was a blueprint for control. He hadn't lied about my infertility to protect me. He'd done it to own the narrative of my body. The twins inside me were proof of what happens when power forgets it's dealing with people, not experiments. By the time the first hearing was scheduled, I wasn't scared anymore. Just hollowed out, sharpened. I wore black, not for mourning, but as armor. As I took the stand, I felt the twins shift again, restless under my ribs, like they could sense the weight of the moment. The attorney asked questions, polite but pointed. "You're certain your husband falsified your medical records?" "Yes." "You're aware that your claims could lead to criminal charges against him?" "I'm aware." My voice didn't tremble. Every word felt etched into me. When they presented his defense, that I was delusional, that the documents were forged, I almost smiled. Gaslighting always sounds the same, too rehearsed, too calm. But I had my recordings, the originals, the timestamp drives. And I had my memory, fractured but mine again. After the session ended, Emma squeezed my shoulder. "They'll fight dirty," she warned. "You ready for that?" I looked at the courthouse steps gleaming with rain and said, "They taught me how to fight dirty." That night, as I sat alone in the motel again, I thought about the phrase trial of memory. It wasn't just about proving facts, it was about proving existence. I was rebuilding myself in public, frame by frame, while the world decided whether to believe me. But truth has its own gravity. It doesn't need belief to be real. Only time. When the twins came, they didn't arrive with the drama of sirens or rushing corridors. They came quietly, in a small county hospital that still used paper charts, and had never heard of Genesis Biogenetics. Rain fell steady against the window, the kind that makes everything sound farther away. I remember the nurse's gloved hands, the way she said, "You're doing fine," and meant it not as data but as comfort. The moment I heard the first cry, something inside me unclenched. It was small, human, imperfect, a sound that didn't belong to any experiment. When they placed the babies on my chest, I looked for signs, any proof of manipulation or design, but all I saw were two perfect strangers who felt instantly familiar. One opened her eyes first, dark and clear like polished stone, and I whispered, "You're real." The other curled his tiny fist around my finger, anchoring me to the present. For the first time in years, I wasn't haunted by files or evidence. I was holding truth that breathed. Emma stood at the doorway, camera in hand, capturing the moment for the documentary she'd already begun to cut together. "You sure you want this filmed?" she'd asked earlier. "It's your story now," I'd told her. "Let people see what survived." Outside, the case had taken on a life of its own. Protesters' investigations, op-eds debating whether I was a whistleblower or a myth. None of it mattered in that room. The world could argue about my credibility. I was busy learning how to breathe in sync with 2 new heartbeats. The nurses came and went, checking vitals, but I kept replaying a single thought. They tried to make me a subject, and instead I became a mother twice over. Every sound in that room felt sacred, even the steady beep of the monitor, the shuffle of shoes on linoleum. In the days that followed, the outside world began to close in again. Reporters called, producers offered interviews, and lawyers kept sending drafts of settlements disguised as apologies. I ignored them all. My focus shifted to feeding schedules, the soft weight of them in my arms, the strange calm that came with exhaustion. At night, when the babies finally slept, I'd sit by the window and watch the city lights blur into rivers. The documentary footage Emma shot played on her laptop in loops. My testimony, the files spread on the motel floor. The courthouse steps slick with rain. She said it was important to finish the story, to show how truth costs everything and still refuses to die. I agreed, but I didn't want to live inside that story anymore. I wanted to write a new one, built on the quiet between their breaths. One afternoon, a letter arrived from an anonymous sender. Inside was a single sentence printed in typewriter font. "They only erase what they fear will remember itself." No signature. I burned it over the sink. The ashes floated upward before dissolving, like memory finally letting go. Sometimes, in the half-sleep of early morning, I still heard echoes. The hum of fluorescent lights, the click of a pen, the calm voice asking, "Do you remember what you signed?" But the fear didn't own me anymore. I'd answer silently, "Yes, and I remember what you took." Then I'd look at the twins, tangled in their blankets, and feel the simplest truth of all I won. Not through courts or headlines, but through existence. They could question my sanity, discredit my evidence, dismantle my case, but they couldn't unmake what was breathing in that crib. Months passed. The documentary premiered under the title The Children of Silence. Viewers called it haunting, devastating, brave. I didn't attend the screening. Instead, I watched from home, rocking the twins while Emma's narration filled the room. My voice on the screen sounded distant, like it belonged to someone I used to know. But when the final frame showed my hands holding theirs, I felt something close to peace. The credits rolled, the rain began again, and I whispered to the sleeping house, "We're free." It's strange how silence can become a sound once you've lived through enough noise. A year after the documentary aired, life had learned to whisper again. I moved the twins to a small coastal town where the mornings smelled of salt and pine, where no one recognized my face from headlines. The ocean became my metronome, each tide a reminder that nothing, not even trauma, stays fixed. The house I bought was half renovated and a little crooked, but it belonged to me in a way nothing ever had before. No signatures forged, no contracts buried in fine print. Some nights, when the wind pushed through the cracked window frames, I'd imagine the past rushing back in, the courthouse lights, the sterile hum of the research lab, the look in his eyes when he finally understood he couldn't control the story anymore. He'd vanished after the trial, resigned, reputation dismantled, company dissolved. They said he left the country. I didn't care to know where. What mattered was that his absence made room for sound, laughter, small feet, the thud of toys against the floor. The twins were walking now, fearless and uncoordinated, leaving fingerprints on every surface like tiny signatures of defiance. Sometimes they'd press their palms against the window and watch the sea, and I'd think about how they'd begun as someone else's secret, yet ended as the purest form of truth I'd ever known. Emma visited once a month, bringing updates about the lawsuits still unfolding, the new laws being drafted to regulate memory research. "You started something bigger than you realize," she said, sipping coffee that went cold while she watched the twins chase the cat across the porch. I smiled, but deep down I didn't want to be the start of anything anymore. I wanted to be the middle, the quiet, steady heartbeat between before and after. I wrote sometimes, not reports or testimonies but letters to the children, sealed and dated for when they're old enough to understand. In them, I tell the story without the names, without the science. I tell it like a myth, a woman who lost her voice, and the 2 stars that taught her to speak again. At night I lock those letters in a cedar box under the bed, not out of fear but reverence. Some memories deserve rest. On their first birthday, we went to the shoreline. The sky was an impossible blue, the kind that makes you forget laboratories and litigation. I let them dip their toes in the surf, shrieking at the cold, their laughter scattering gulls. A stranger walking by smiled and said, "They look just like you." The comment was ordinary, forgettable, and it undid me. Because after everything, that's all I ever wanted, to be seen not as a subject or a survivor, but simply as a mother whose children resembled her. That night, after they'd fallen asleep, I stood on the porch with the ocean stretched out like a heartbeat. The wind carried the faintest echo of my past life, the beeping machines, the courtroom murmurs. But it didn't frighten me. It just reminded me that stories, once spoken, don't disappear, they settle into the air and become weather. I closed my eyes and whispered a final line, not for anyone else but for myself. I remember everything, and still I choose peace. Then I turned off the porch light, walked back inside, and let the silence stay, alive, present, whole.